Hi guys, thank you so much for joining me. Before we get to today's video, I wanted to let you know that my new book, The Ladder or the Grind, and personal exploration of career choices between employment or entrepreneurship comes out on Amazon on March 1st, 2020. In it, I go through all the decisions and factors that go into this career choice. I even interview other people who are both entrepreneurs or employees and talk to them about their choices and the paths that they chose. I hope you'll check it out. I'll have a link to it in the description below. Today we're going to talk about the new upcoming and proposed crowdfunding rule changes, but first I need more coffee. All right, I've got my second round of coffee so life can continue. So crowdfunding has been around since the late 1990s, and it's become a really popular form of raising money for a startup. As a matter of fact, some sources actually believe that it will reach over $300 billion per year by 2025. And although that number is not something that's being hit right now, I can tell you that hundreds of billions of dollars have been raised for startups through crowdfunding. Now, if you're not familiar with the term, the way to think of crowdfunding is raising small dollar contributions from a large number of people. And it actually happens in two different forms. With crowdfunding, the most popular form is basically you're pre-selling a product or a service. So let's imagine for a moment that your startup is developing a new version of a Yeti coffee mug. And so you go on a popular site like Kickstarter and post the prototype and pictures of what you're doing, and then you give out some rewards to folks in exchange for their contributions. So if they just give you $5, maybe they get to be on your email list for when the product comes out and be notified. If they give you $25, maybe they get a version of your coffee mug. If they give you $50, maybe they get a version of your coffee mug and a t-shirt or some other cool swag. And so that's the most popular way that they do this. And so by pre-selling this new product that I'm developing, I go ahead and get capital in hand so I can go out and manufacture it and then produce it. And the second way it happens is in some instances, startups do give up equity or shares or ownership, whatever you want to call it, in their startup. Now this is less common because traditional investors like angels and venture capitalists frown on this type of fundraising. And the reason is because when you do that, if you're raising small dollars from large numbers of people, your cap table or the list of who owns shares in your company is going to become very, very congested. And so there's a lot of investors to manage in that instance. So crowdfunding's been around for a while. There's a couple of ways that you can go about it. And up until recently, you had a maximum of $1 million that your startup could raise through crowdfunding. Now, first of all, it's important to put that into perspective. $1 million is quite a bit of capital and is a pretty large, what we would call seed round or early round of funding. But the SEC has decided that's not quite enough, so there are some proposed rule changes out there right now to increase that to $5 million. Now, I want to put this in more further perspective for you. That's not going to be as impactful as a lot of people think it's going to be. Certainly $1 million was a lot of capital you could raise, and definitely $5 million is. And what I do love about the idea of this $5 million benchmark is that a lot of startups that are successful end up having to raise subsequent rounds of funding. And so they go through their $1 million and then they have to raise more. In this instance, if they've been able to raise more than $1 million through their crowdfunding, they may not have to go and take the time to do a subsequent round before they become their product reaches the mass markets and becomes what's called generally available. So I love the idea that the SEC and the government is thinking of ways to make it easier for startups to raise capital through crowdfunding. But I don't think it's going to be as impactful as a lot of people may think it's going to be. So before you get too excited, let's look at some of the numbers. Now, a few sources that I looked at, the numbers tend to show that the average startup raises just over $100,000 through crowdfunding. Now, keep in mind these are successful raises. So the way it works on sites like Kickstarter is you go on and list your product and then you share the amount that you're going to raise. As a matter of fact, I did a Kickstarter campaign where I was raising money for a new app I was going to launch. The benchmark I had set To do that was $8,000. The reason I did it so low is because I was going to contribute my own capital. But I wanted to see if the market would pre-fund the idea and use that in some sort of validation. But the average startup that is successful in raising their benchmark is a little bit over $100,000. So we're looking at a large number of startups that try to raise capital through crowdfunding that aren't successful. Even when they are successful, it's only $100,000. And then the typical contribution per user is just a few $100s. So even at the $1 million benchmark that was set or is set as of today, you're looking at most startups not raising that much through crowdfunding in the first place, not reaching that benchmark. And that's why I don't think the $5 million cap is going to be that impactful for people. Certainly there have been a few startups in the past that have raised a lot of money through Kickstarter and through crowdfunding campaigns, but I'm going to be shocked if we ever see someone hit the $5 million benchmark. It might happen, but I just don't see it being that common. The other thing to think about is when you raise that large of a number through small dollar contributions, if you do go the equity share route, you're going to have an enormous number of contributors or investors on what's called your cap table. And so this is something to think about. If you go that route where you're not just pre-selling a product and giving away swag to early adopters, you're going to have a huge number of people on your cap table, and that is going to keep investors away from a lot of startups that go that route. So I'm thrilled that the government's trying to find ways to make it easier for startups to raise more capital efficiently, effectively, and with less overhead in terms of costs. But I'm not sure it's going to make the impact that we really think it's going to make. What could be better is to increase the amount or reduce the amount of regulations and add more exemptions to the rule that allow you to raise faster dollars in subsequent rounds of funding that aren't through seed capital. Anyways, that's my take on the new proposed crowdfunding rules. I hope that helps. Shoot me some messages below, comments below if you have any other questions about it, and we'll see you later. Thanks a lot.